Hello out there in YouTube land. This is Morrisman, and as always, I thank you guys for coming to my channel. Today I'm going to do a short video because I had a conversation with my keyboard player yesterday, and we were talking about some things, and he said, you ought to do this segment on your show. So I decided to do that because it's pretty interesting. You know, it's entitled Things That Most People Don't Know About, music business, or certain things that go on in the music business, and we talked about that. And also ghostwriting, and some people that have utilized that service, and most people don't realize that they have. I start off by just saying, here's some interesting bits of information that most people didn't know about, like Michael Jackson. Ever since Michael Jackson was a early or young adult in his teens, late teens, he's been using hormone therapy, and that's to have kept his voice so high. Because when you reach puberty, your voice changes. And the reason why he was secretly doing that, and it makes sense, it's just a little, out of, or just kind of extreme, should I say, better lack of words, that he would do that. But, his reasoning was he didn't want to have the same faith as Frankie Lyman. And we all know who Frankie Lyman was. He was this powerhouse of a young singer in the late 50s. And Michael Jackson has a lot of similarities to Frankie Lyman, because Frankie Lyman was a little boy singing like a grown man. And you rarely ever find that. And Michael Jackson was the same thing. He was a little boy singing like a grown man. And, as far as Frankie Lyman's career, unfortunately, it was drugs and then the fact that he got older. And his voice changed, which is normal. And actually had a really nice sounding voice when he became of age. But the music industry is a cruel industry. If they can't use you anymore, they toss you to the side, because I guess they wanted Frankie Lyman to continue to sound like an 9-year-old when he was 30, which is ridiculous. And that's why his career, along with the drugs, kind of ended too soon. And the same thing with Michael Jackson. He didn't want people to forget about him, or what happened to that young singing Michael Jackson. So he was, using that for years to keep his voice kind of high-pitched. And then here's another little interesting tidbit. When you think of Elvis Presley, you think of course, the great showmanship on stage, the great singing, and the beautiful wavy black hair, when actually Elvis Presley was a blind by birth. And he had just been using dye all his life to keep his hair black. So that's just kind of interesting. But we were more so talking about this, the ghostwriting aspect. And I'm going to say this, I'm going to give you a definition, and then I'm going to give you my opinion of it. Ghostwriting is when two parties get together. One has perhaps a song that could be a #1 hit charter, and that person sells it to another already productive, high profile entertainer who's kind of running around the creativity thing. Because, you can only write so many good songs, and then you have your periods where, you kind of running dry. So they enter into this agreement that the entertainer will buy the song, but he will buy the whole rights and claim it as his own, pay off the ghostwriter in a pretty good amount of money. And at that point, the ghostwriter has no other claims to that song. He can't get any future royalties or anything. So it normally works for both parties. And my take on that is, opinion is, I don't personally have a problem with that, because it's not a situation where one person is getting taken advantage of, or one person reaps the benefits and the other one doesn't. Actually, they both do. And then with the person that's writing the songs, there are a lot of people out there that are sitting on some really good songs, but they will never be able to put them out there because they either don't have the ability to, as far as, knowing the right people or getting in touch with the right people. So, those songs really never, they go unnoticed or unpublished. So, it helps the writer, at least get some money for his work. And then it helps the already established artist to continue his success. So I don't have a problem with that, because I personally have entered into that agreement on many occasions, and I still hear some of my stuff on the radio to this day. It's just unfortunate now, as I look back on it, that I can't tell people that I wrote that, because I get sued big time, So unfortunately, I go unnamed, which is fine, because the money that I was given, it helps out a great deal. So that's the definition of it. And there's some artists, and when you are a musician, you can kind of key in on how an artist writes, you know, his writing style, his guitar playing style, because again, if you really kind of look at it, you can determine and see styles and patterns in every entertainer and every musician. Because I know that when I hear Babyface compositions that he produced for other people, I know within the first couple of bars who produced it, because I hear that famous B section, which I love, the lavish piano of layers and arrangements and just how he writes. You know, it's very distinguishable. So just here's an example, and we were talking about this last night, and this is actually a good example of when you look at an artist and you can see his pattern of writing, and then all of a sudden he releases a song that's totally different from everything else that he's done and everything else thereafter, you know, because it's different when you have, you know, as you keep doing things, you get better, you incorporate more things into what you're doing, and then you just stay consistent with that throughout your career, as opposed to you've been writing only 4 chords songs, and then you write this song that got these changes, these B sections, augmented, diminished chords, then you go back to those other 4 chord writing songs again. So it kind of tells you that what's going on here. And a good example of that is, and this is not negative because we actually know him, and you know, I think he's a tremendous talent, R. Kelly. If you look at his stuff, you know, the majority of the songs he writes are just 4 chord songs. And they just consist of major chords, minor chords, and a lot of minor 7 chords. That's it. Then when I Believe I Can Fly came around, song that had B section, augmented chords in it, and then it changed keys, which he's never done before. You know, when we laughed about this last night, because we know that, you know, some of these songs on these artists, and that particular song, it was authored by somebody else, because you can look at the pattern and tell that it's totally different from anything before and anything after. Because here's an interesting story, and I'll make this brief. There was a movie, and it's 2 of them. It's a sequel to it, and I encourage everybody to check it out. It's a good movie on music. Eddie and the Crusaders, and there was 2 of them. The story was about this guy who had fame in the 50s or in the mid-60s, and then he released a second album, which was different from the first album, and the record company hated it because they wanted him to keep turning out these same songs like on the first album, and he didn't want to do that. So he became frustrated because they wouldn't release the second album and faked his death. And in the second movie, he surfaces as another person, because it's like 20 years later. He changed his name, he looks different, and he started another band and was trying to, you know, continue. And he still had his talents as far as his writing and everything, so he gathered up a band, and he was rehearsing them and kind of pushing them too hard, and he got frustrated. And there was a scene in the movie where he went outside and he was tearing up the stuff he wrote. And the saxophone player came out and said, and I'll never forget this scene because it was really interesting. He said, "It's a shame that the world won't get any more songs written by Eddie." And when he looked at him, he knew who he was. So then he said, "I know who you was the first time I heard you playing in the club when we met." He said, "A man can change his physical appearance, but he can't change the way that he plays." And I totally agree. And he said that, you know, that was the point he was making, that he was still the same person as far as his writing. You know, you can change the way you look, but, you know, and he said that it's like your music is like fingerprints. No 2 are alike. And again, I agree so much on that saying and that statement because it's true. And that's the same thing with when you look closely at any artist, you can see their pattern as far as their writing style, the types of chords they use, and you know, you can kind of distinguish and see that this is who they are. And then, like I said, and I stress, you know, it's different when you're just growing. You know, you start off doing this, but you're building. But when you start off like this, have something totally different, and then all of a sudden you go back to that, it's kind of an indication that perhaps somebody helped you. You know, somebody else gave you these songs to do. And again, it's not taken away from R. Kelly. We ain't pointing him out, but that's just a good example of perhaps ghostwriting when you see that type of, you know, situation unfolds. So, you know, I thought that was kind of interesting, and he told me, you know, I should share this with you guys on YouTube. So I did. So until next time, take care, and I appreciate the views and the subscriptions.